Something is buried under Greenland. Right now, as you watch this, it is still down there, locked inside 2 miles of ice, slowly, quietly, waking up. In 1959, the United States Army drove heavy equipment onto the Greenland ice sheet and started digging. Not a small excavation, a city. An entire city, carved into the ice, powered by a nuclear reactor, connected by 21 tunnels stretching more than 3,000 feet end to end. They called it Camp Century. They told the world it was a science experiment, a polar research station, a bold engineering achievement for the free world. That was a lie. Well, not entirely. Camp Century was real. The science was real. But the science was a cover story, and what it was covering makes the whole thing feel like something out of a Cold War nightmare. Keep that in mind, because the real secret does not come out for almost 4 decades. Let's go back to 1959. The Cold War is burning at its coldest. The Soviet Union has nuclear weapons pointed at American cities. American strategists are losing sleep over one question. What happens if the Soviets launch first? Where do you hide missiles that can survive a first strike and still fire back? The answer one team came up with was almost unbelievable. Hide them under the Greenland ice sheet. Hundreds of them. Mobile nuclear missiles on rail systems, tunneling through the ice, constantly moving so no enemy satellite could ever pin them down. The program had a name, Project Iceworm. The Danish Institute for International Studies obtained declassified documents in 1996 that confirmed it. The plan was a network of nuclear launch sites stretching beneath 52,000 square miles of the Greenland ice cap, capable of striking targets deep inside the Soviet Union. Denmark controlled Greenland. The United States never asked to Denmark for permission. Not once. But before you can hide missiles under ice, you have to know if ice can even hold a city. That is where Camp Century comes in. In July 1959, Army engineers from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers arrived on the ice sheet in northwest Greenland, about 150 miles from the coast. They did not drill down. They cut sideways, carving horizontal trenches into the ice, then roofing them over with curved steel arches. Inside those tunnels, they built a post office, a chapel, a barber shop, a library, a theater, a hospital, and a nuclear reactor. An actual PM-2A nuclear reactor, small enough to fit inside a buried tunnel, powerful enough to heat and light the entire base. At peak operation, Camp Century housed roughly 200 soldiers, all living and working under the ice, in the dark, in temperatures that outside the tunnels dropped to minus 70 degrees Fahrenheit. For a moment, just picture it. You are a U.S. soldier in 1960. You eat dinner in a cafeteria under the ice. You sleep in a room carved out of frozen water. Above you, more than 100 feet of ice presses down. You are told this is a research station. You are not told what the research is really for. Here is where the story gets colder. The Army brought in a glaciologist named Henry Bader, who had already spent years studying ice. Bader and others on the project understood something the planners did not want to hear. The Greenland ice sheet is not static. It flows. It moves. It bends and warps and shifts under its own colossal pressure, constantly, slowly, unstoppably. The tunnels at Camp Century began to deform almost immediately. The curved steel arches started to buckle. Engineers had to continuously re-excavate passages to keep them open. By 1966, just 7 years after construction began, the ice had won. The Army abandoned Camp Century. Project Iceworm was quietly canceled. The missiles never came. Denmark never found out, not officially, not for 30 years. But here is the part that does not end. In 1966, when the Army left Camp Century, they left almost everything behind. Equipment, fuel, diesel, polychlorinated biphenyls, the toxic chemicals known as PCBs. low-level radioactive waste from the nuclear reactor. All of it, sealed under ice, assumed to stay frozen forever. In 1966, that assumption seemed safe. The Arctic was cold. The ice was permanent. Nobody was coming back. In 2016, researchers from the University of York published a study in the journal Geophysical Research Letters. They had gone back and done the math. Camp Century sits in a zone of the ice sheet that, under current climate projections, could begin to melt from below within this century. When it does, an estimated 53,000 gallons of diesel fuel, 630,000 gallons of wastewater, including raw sewage, and an unknown quantity of radioactive coolant fluid will not stay buried. The ice that was supposed to be a vault will become a current, carrying that waste toward the ocean. Denmark and the United States have not reached a formal agreement on who is responsible for the cleanup. As of the most recent public statements from both governments, the question remains officially open. So here's where things stand today. 2 miles of Greenland ice sit on top of a ghost city that was never supposed to exist. The tunnels are collapsed. The reactor building is crushed. But the waste is still there. Still frozen, still waiting. Scientists cannot say exactly when the melt will reach it, or whether refreezing cycles will delay it. The ice sheet does not follow a simple schedule. What they can say is that the problem does not disappear just because it is buried. Project Iceworm never fired a single missile. Camp Century never became what its architects imagined. But the thing they left under the ice is real, documented, and unresolved. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is a declassified fact. And somewhere under 6,000 feet of Greenland ice, the cold is slowly losing. If this is the kind of story the world forgets, but you want to remember, subscribe to Maturin Legends. There are more of them, and they are all still out there.